I call on Government Order of the Day number 1.
Mixed Ownership Model Bill, second reading.
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Mixed Ownership Model Bill be now read a second time.
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, this bill and this debate is about three things. It's about controlling our nation's debt, it's about strengthening New Zealand's capital markets, and it's about providing funding for new high-priority infrastructure projects. Mr Speaker, no nation can afford to let debt get out of control. Huge debt is at the core of why countries like the United Kingdom, Ireland, Spain, Italy and Greece are being forced to impose tough measures on their citizens. We do not want that for New Zealand. I ask those on the other side of the chamber, why would they seek to expose this country to more risk and more debt than we need to in volatile world markets? Mr Speaker, the National-led government is committed to getting on top of debt, protecting and growing our economy and keeping it safe for New Zealanders from the debt-ridden troubles plaguing other countries. Mr Speaker, our mixed ownership policy is part of a wider economic program to reduce debt, increase savings and get our country through one of the worst economic crises the world has seen in 100 years. It is also, Mr Speaker, a key part of our post-election plan and our business growth agenda. Mr Speaker, it's very important to point out that we have guaranteed the government will always own at least 51% of these companies and prevent any other shareholder from owning more than 10%. Mr Speaker, that will ensure widespread New Zealand investment. It is written into this bill, and all the opposition approach on this is to ignore those simple facts. 51% at least government ownership and no other shareholder able to own more than 10%. Mr Speaker, it's written into the bill. This partial share government float program, Mr Speaker, will also help reinvigorate New Zealand's capital markets and bring stronger commercial disciplines to each of the mixed ownership model companies. Mr Speaker, the government has been upfront with New Zealanders over our decisions in this matter. We have talked about it for 18 months. We took it to the country last November. We sought and we obtained a mandate, Mr Speaker. And the consultation process that has happened since then has included 10 hui which were held around the country earlier this year. The Select Committee travelled to hear submissions and all submitters have had their views considered, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the opponents claim this will increase power prices. Well, Mr Speaker, under this government there is now a more competitive electricity market than ever before. Mr Speaker, in the 7 months to February, 306,000 customers switched providers to get cheaper prices. And that market regime is in place and is not affected by the minority ownership of these mixed ownership companies, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, this government and this parliament has a duty to future generations to control our debt, which is projected to increase to about 30% of GDP in the next few years. Mr Speaker, this program is expected to raise between $5 and $7 billion to invest in high-priority infrastructure that will help grow our economy, important social infrastructure like schools and hospitals. And that, Mr Speaker, is $5 to $7 billion we would otherwise have to borrow from overseas lenders, Mr Speaker. These share floats will provide a minority stake in some of our SOEs to enable the investment and to enable this country to go forward. This is good economic management, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the 4 energy SOEs, because this will undoubtedly come up, the 4 energy SOEs dividends have averaged about 4.1% over the last 5 years, which compares with the cost of new debt for the same period of around 5.2%. That's the reality, Mr Speaker. This arrangement makes strong fiscal sense. And the future profitability of these companies, which some private shareholders will get to participate in through their dividends, will be captured in the eventual sales price. So the country gets the cash up front, which makes a lot of sense in these difficult times. Mr. Speaker, this government understands the fiscal risks the world is facing. We are not afraid to make the right decisions to protect New Zealand from the world's financial crisis. Mr. Speaker, the opposition will now posture, they'll exaggerate, they'll claim it's rushed, that it's happening too quickly, that it's losing money, that it's not needed. They are all wrong on all counts, Mr. Speaker. They are politically posturing and not thinking of the long-term future of this country. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, it's entirely consistent.
I will stand. Could I just remind members on my extreme left that they should look at Speaker's rulings 60/5. Interjections are to be rare and reasonable.
Yes.
Call the Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, they are politically posturing and not thinking of the long-term future of this country. Unfortunately, it is entirely consistent with their approach, where they oppose any move, including this one, to strengthen the New Zealand economy. They oppose moves to strengthen the country's accounts and to invest in New Zealand's future. They oppose the mixed ownership model, and they oppose our investment, frankly, not just in schools and hospitals, but they've opposed our broadband investment, they've opposed our transport investment, they've opposed the irrigation investment, they've opposed the new convention centre, they're opposed to oil and gas, they're opposed to foreign investment, and they're opposed to the Hobbit movies. They oppose everything that would give the New Zealand economy an opportunity to get ahead. Mr. Speaker, they are playing with politics with New Zealand's security. They are playing politics with New Zealand's future. This government, Mr. Speaker, has its eye on the ball. Mr. Speaker, this government is focused on jobs, on growth, on the financial security of New Zealanders, and on investing in our future. Mr. Speaker, over the next few weeks, the opposition will continue to see how challenging the world is financially. The mixed ownership bill, Mr. Speaker, is a part of this government's wider economic program that will help control debt, increase savings, control spending, strengthen our capital markets, and get our country successfully through the worst financial crisis the world has seen in nearly a century. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to acknowledge the fine and sterling work of the Select Committee, and I would like to commend this bill to the House.
Order, order. The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
I call the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.